The Professional and Personal Life of Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff.
I'm Letitia Ferrer, the daughter of Uta Hagen and stepdaughter of Herbert Berghoff.
I'm Teresa Tuscher, the granddaughter of Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff.
We created this podcast to share ours and other stories of life with Uta and Herbert.
We hope you'll join us in listening to these adventures.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Professional and Personal Life of Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff. On today's episode, we have Alan Paley. He was at Lincoln Center Library. Your title was?
I was producer of public programs and performances. Before that, I was the assistant to the producer.
And he was also one of the board members of HB Studio for about 15 years, if I'm correct.
Yeah, just about exactly 15 years.
Okay. I'd like to welcome him to the show. I'm going to dive in and I'm going to start with so I know personally we did a project together at Lincoln Center Library regarding my grandmother. How did you come about getting to know my grandmother? How did you discover Uta Hagen? What brought you to her? And how long ago was it?
Well, just to go way back, when I was a kid in the Bronx, I took Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf out of the library, the published book, play. And I remember reading it overnight, leaning on my fire escape, and I was just blown away by it. But I was really too young to go and see it. I think it was still on at that time. But I thought, what a great play. I wish I could see it. I've seen later productions, but I've never had the pleasure of actually seeing the brilliant original production. So I went to work for the New York Public Library as a teenager, and later on, I was at the library at Lincoln Center, where I worked on public programs and exhibitions in a variety of capacities. Around 1991, I became the lead producer, the head of the public programs and the auditorium space at the. And one of the things I initiated in the mid 90s, I guess it was, when the Lilly and Gish papers were donated to the library, I realized that creating public programs out of materials that are in these incredible collections is publicize them and also makes great theater, because those people wrote letters in those days, and the scripts from the plays they did and screenings of movies and reminiscences of their friends, which in turn get recorded and become part of the oral history of the person in question. So that, I had done that and the library had done that with music before, music manuscripts, dance films, but it had never been done with theater collection materials. So the Lilly and Gish was a great success, and shortly after that, I continued, and one of the programs I wanted to do was based on the library's Clifford Odets papers. And I thought I'd been doing Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams. For Tennessee Williams, I've got Eli Wallach and Ann Jackson, who were so close to Tennessee, and later very close to Uta as well.
Yeah, I met them. They were nice people.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
And, however, for Clifford Odets, whose papers are at the library, I thought of Uta Hagen because she won her first Tony for The Country Girl in the 1950s. And she agreed to do a program, but then she got an acting job, so she had to drop out. So we talked about that. I think it might.
I was going to say, which job?
I would guess it might have been Mrs. Klein or Collected Stories. This was 19.
Okay. Yeah, it was one of those.
And of course, she was teaching as well. So there's only as fearless and hardworking as she was, there's only a limit to how much you can do.
Yeah. Right.
I was able to get somebody else. I got an actress named Bethel Leslie, who had worked with Clifford Odets, to do that program.
Okay.
Uta did tell me in that phone call that she was leaving her papers and the papers of HB to the library's theater division.
Okay.
Um, and that would come much later, obviously.
Yeah.
So time went on, and I continued doing those sorts of programs with uh, Catherine Hepburn papers, Cheryl Crawford, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the Uta Hagen Herbert Berghoff papers came to the library. When they were processed, I thought this is a great uh, subject, obviously, for a series of public programs.
Hmm.
And another thing is when you have these collections and you have people's correspondence, you can tell who their friends were by what they say in those letters.
Yeah.
Of course, you know who worked with them professionally because you could look that up.
Right.
But so I started going through the collection and inviting people whom I knew Uta, most of whom had some connection with HB Studio, but not
Hmm.
all of them.
Okay.
And some of the programs were panels. Uh, there are still two panels, which are actually archived on the library's website, so you can watch them. And
Okay.
one of them is with Fritz Weaver, Hal Prince, Barbara Barry, Richard Easton,
I've seen it.
and the other one is was it Karen Ludwig, Austin Pendleton, Rochelle.
Okay. Because Rachelle and Fritz did readings
Oh,
of
I
the
did.
papers. Yeah.
In addition, in that initial series, uh, in addition to their appearance on separate panels, Fritz
Hmm.
Rachelle, who became dear friends of mine, and I miss them very much,
Yeah.
we put together a program called Darling Pop-a-lop, readings from the letters of
Hmm.
Uta and her father.
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing about that is frequently when you do these programs and curate these programs that involve correspondence, you have one side as a rule. When you do these collections, which partly consist of readings of the wonderful correspondence in these archives that had never been published in most cases,
Hmm.
you tend to have one side of them. You have the correspondence that was written to the person who gave you their archives.
Right.
But in the case of Uta and her father, you had her father's letters to her as well
Hmm.
as her letters to him because she
Yeah.
inherited.
Yeah.
That made an interesting program between Fritz and Rochelle. And that too, that's not on the website, but that was taped and videotaped, and that's in the library's Theater on Film and Tape archive.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I did a wonderful program in that series because I realized from his letters to her and that he was in her last performance, that her last play, that David Hyde Pierce was a good
Hmm.
friend of her
Six dance lessons. Yeah.
dance lessons. And he agreed to be on a program, and I put him together on a program with Arthur French, who was quite
Oh.
wonderful act.
Yeah.
And I opened that program with Marion Seldes, who
Okay.
knew Uta and may have taken a class of hers when they were both in Chicago.
Okay.
So Marion sort of opened that program, talked for a while, read something. And then the rest of the program were readings, reminiscences and readings of Arthur French and David Hyde Pierce, then
Okay.
readings from the letters in the collection to Uta. And then David said to me, this is in advance of the program, obviously, Uta had given him some of her father's Handel manuscripts because her father, of course, was a great music
Yeah.
scholar.
We did that
Yeah. And
when she died. We had given him
yeah.
some of the music.
So he was when he well, this was his, I think, a birthday or Christmas present. This is before she died.
Okay. Okay.
As he talks about this. And though he felt so awed by it, he said, I'd love to look at them and then give them back to you. So you may have given them back to him after we're done.
Okay. Yeah, because when she died, we had a lot of stuff and we said, we'll give it to him. And then he was like, are you sure? And we said, please take it.
But what he did, he said, I would like to play something from those the music manuscripts
Hmm.
that Uta had, and I'm going to get Jason Danieli, my friend, to sing an aria from one of these manuscripts, which was
Okay.
Candelaria, the opening aria, I think, from Xerxes, the opera. And we preceded that, which is, of course, to a tree, it's called. It's a
Okay.
aria about a tree. But the interesting thing was there are letters to Uta from um,
Hyman.
Earl Hyman
Hmm.
saying, I'm in Norway now and I have two trees in front of my house, and one is called Uta and the other is called Herbert.
Oh,
But that letter is perfect to precede this.
yeah. He
This,
taught at the studio.
yeah, we had his memorial there.
Yeah, he was my godfather.
Wow, I didn't know that. I
Yep.
didn't.
Yep.
So that was another great program. We had a program with Victor Slezak and Lila Robbins
Hmm.
uh, and Katie Finneran, and each of these programs featured their reminiscences of working with Uta, studying with her, or just seeing her on stage
Hmm.
and doing some of the readings
Okay.
uh, from the collection. But this is the library's calendar for that
Oh,
season, and you can see
that's wonderful,
David up here and Lila here.
Lila.
And because normally I wouldn't have featured three people from the same series on the cover, but I thought I have to.
Hmm.
And,
Okay.
and then, of course, the series was called A Challenge for the Artist, Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff in the
Okay.
theater. So that really was quite a wonderful series. And I got
Yeah.
to know, we had, for instance, a scholar, Millie Barringer, who had written a lot about the subject, to talk about the production of Othello of Uta and
Hmm.
Paul Robeson. One of the most amazing things in Uta's collection is a, you, when a biography was being written about Paul Robeson,
Hmm.
the um, the author, whose name escapes me at the moment, very famous,
Martin.
Martin
Martin.
Duberman, Martin
Yeah.
Duberman. He wrote to Uta and said, I want to interview you about this. I know it's a very sensitive subject for you for a number of reasons. So what I propose is that we do the interview and then I audio tape it and I send you the recording to make sure it's all accurate and okay with you.
Hmm.
So, or we'll transcribe it, I think he said.
Okay.
So a transcription. In any case,
Hmm.
that transcription is in the archive in her papers, and it reads like a play. It's all
Okay.
it's Martin and Uda back and forth talking about Paul, their closeness to each other, as well as the production, touring with the production, all of the discrimination they had to face because
Yeah.
um, Paul couldn't stay in the same hotel. It really is a heartbreaking story in many ways.
It's horrific. Yeah. I don't know if he did this, but there's an interview that is on PBS talking about when they did Othello, and it's video, and I just watched it, and the stories that she tells, you're disgusted by it.
Yeah. But
You're really disgusted by it.
and she also talks about just working on Othello, and in fact, she wasn't happy with the recording. But when I listen to the recording, I just think it's wonderful.
Hmm.
Um, and talking about Paul, his concerns about
Yeah.
performing, his voice, his teaching, uh, his lessons. So it really is an amazing document, and I thought this reads like a play. So I
Right.
excerpted it, and we had two actors read it as if it was a play, but it was really a part of that interview between Martin Duberman and Uta Hagen.
Okay.
And also in that series, we had a panel with Mary Anthony, Ann Jackson, Edward Morehouse, Eli Wallach, and Jesse Filer
Wow.
about Utet.
Okay.
And then we had another one with, in addition to the two which I've mentioned, which are online,
Hmm.
one with Edward Albee, Mitch Erickson, Ann Kaufman, and Richard Maw, who was chairman of the board of HB,
Yep.
was doing these programs. And so this was really a wide-ranging series which covered uh, quite a lot of aspects and sides of Uta's life
Hmm.
from the early days. And many of these programs, not all of them, were taped. A few years after that, that was I think that was around 2000. That was 2008. The fall of
Okay.
began, and I retired from the library after 42 years. I retired in 2010, and then I was invited uh, by Edith and the board of HB.
Hmm.
And later in 2010, I was asked if I would curate the program part of the benefit that year,
Okay. Okay.
which was going to take place at the Players Club.
Okay.
And I said, of course, it would be a pleasure to do that.
Hmm.
I had spent my career as head of programs at the library getting people to do things for nothing, to donate their time, but to work
Right.
very hard on these programs. So I thought,
Hmm.
I'm retired and I can do that.
Yeah.
So
It was a good transition.
yeah. So, and I was doing other freelance work at the time, which was nice. So I said, of course I'd do that. And I got to work, and the program part of the benefit was again to do with Ute and Herbert and HB.
Hmm.
It's considered it was in celebration of the launch of the Hagen Institute.
Okay.
And this is the program for it. I don't know if these things show well on. It was quite yes, it says programs of readings and speakers. And I remember Fritz was on that, and I had the great pleasure uh, to work with the director who HB recruited to direct that program, and that was Sally Burtonshaw, who was really wonderful to work with.
She's
And
one of the OGs.
yeah, so we're still in touch, and I enjoy seeing her once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, so that was late 2010, and
Okay.
shortly after that, I was invited to join the board of directors of HB Studio. And I said, of course, it would be a pleasure.
Hmm.
I had met several of them up by then because I'd worked with them. I met Richard Mall when I was doing the series at the library.
Right.
And then I got to know them. And then, of course, I worked with them on this gala
Right.
program. And, the wonderful thing about going through someone's archives is you feel, and then working with their friends and colleagues, you feel like you really know them.
Hmm.
It really is amazing. Like so many people that I've done these kinds of series about, Margaret Webster,
Right.
Galleon. Um, I just feel like I actually knew them. Poulenc even, dance people.
Okay.
But
But you did get to meet my grandmother in person.
no, I only had that one phone call with her.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Because just by what, as you said, by what you're saying, like it feels like the interactions, like these are actual interactions with her, even though it was through friends.
Yeah, it really is amazing, because I feel like I knew her.
Yeah.
And since then, I've done even more work. Um,
Right.
so later that year, or early the next, I was invited to join the HB board. And
Right.
so many wonderful people on the board who were on the board when I joined are gone now. People who were close to Uta, like Richard
Mhm.
Maw, Fritz and Rachelle, Donna Di Matteo, Alexander.
When did you join the board? What year was it?
Think, well, that benefit was the end of 2010,
Okay.
November 8th, 2010 at the Players.
Okay.
It was some shortly after that I was invited to join the board.
Okay.
And Victor Slazak was on the board then.
Hmm.
Um, we had two boards then. We had the Playwrights Foundation board and the HB Studio board.
Okay.
I think I started out on the Playwrights Foundation board, but that was an administrative thing, and then they were able to combine the two boards
Okay.
after a year or two.
Okay.
Uh, and so one of the things I did as a board member was continue to curate the occasional program uh,
Okay.
related to Uta and Herbert and HB.
Hmm.
One of the one of my other side uh, projects since I retired was to serve on the board of the Noel Coward Foundation. And because during my time at the library, I did a lot of programming and work with the Noel Coward estate. So when I retired, they asked me to join the board as HB did.
Okay.
Um, I learned while a few years after, or maybe I knew this when I joined the HB board, that, and I have to read something to you because I think this was an amazing coincidence for me to learn this. And I've used this later on in the exhibition, which we'll talk about. But I learned that Uta Hagen's very, very first acting experience was in Noel Coward's Hay Fever. And she wrote, my brother acted in the summers, and somehow when I turned 15, he convinced the other actors at the University of Wisconsin to let me play his sister in Hay Fever. I'm not so sure what Noel Coward would have said, but with the local people there, we had a great success. I started to believe perhaps I was an actress. And Uta wrote that in 1983.
Okay.
And if you go back in the library, over the years, she kept some diaries, and
Hmm.
uh, there were later ones which she'll talk about later from the 60s. But there are some very interesting early ones from the 30s.
Hmm.
And she talks about how she was touring in DC in the Seagull with the Lunts, and Noel
Hmm.
Coward came backstage because he was very friendly with the Lunts.
Hmm.
And he told her that she was an incredible young actress. And he was so thrilled to see her as Nina in The Seagull, which was her Broadway debut.
Right.
But this was when went to DC. And he gave her some thoughts. And so there was this connection between them that worked for me,
Hmm.
having been being involved in both milieus, the Noel Coward and the Uta Hagen. So that sort of justified, since I was on the board of the Noel Coward Foundation, um, seeing if I could get a small grant for HB
Okay.
uh, from the foundation. And the first time I tried that, it was successful, and we did a series of programs related to Noel Coward at HB, including
Hmm.
a panel. Uh, Jack Hofsis's, did you know Jack Hofsis, who was teacher at HB for many years?
No.
He directed a sort of lab of design for living, which was great. And of course, we had
Okay.
readings from from Noel's more serious work with some great actors, and that was that all grew out was justified in some way because of Uta's connection to Noel.
Hmm.
Uh, and that was very successful. I think it was called "Don't Let's Be Beastly" HB because that's a quote from one of Noel's songs.
Okay.
Um, HB celebrates Noel Coward. Uh, that was in 2015. Earlier than that, when I retired from the library, they would invite me back to give a lecture occasionally.
Hmm.
So one of the first times I went back to give a lecture at the library, always about the work I had done at the library with video. Um, I I did a program called Lily and Kate and Uta, which
Oh.
which It's called Powerful Women, Great Actors, Amazing Archives. So I talked about working on those archives, working with all the friends and colleagues of those three women, and then
Hmm.
showing some video clips. And that was 2013, June
Okay.
2013. But after that, in addition to the Noel Coward program I just mentioned, series at HB uh, in 2015, which included a panel uh, and the play and some readings, which I put together again. Um, I continued curating programs. One in 2016 was called Shakespeare on Bank Street. And that was a program that wove together scenes with commentary about the scenes from all the Shakespeare plays that Uta and Herbert had been involved with, or many of them in any
Hmm.
case.
Hmm.
And we had a great, and I took some pictures of these. Edith arranged to have taken pictures for, I think, HB Archives, but I took some pictures as well. And so we had in that series, it was always a combination of established actors and teachers and students to bring them
Okay.
together. And for instance, that series included Fritz and Rachelle, and it also included Paul Price, Laura Esterman, uh, Amanda Quaid, and then several students. And that was really good series because a lot of people, they knew about Uta and uh, Othello, but they didn't know about some of the other Shakespeare she'd been involved with, and all of the Shakespeare that um, Admiral Lucretia Taylor was also in that,
Okay.
and all of the Shakespeare that Herbert had been involved with as well.
Hmm.
So that would have been 20. That was 2014, 2015. No, that was Noel Coward was 2014, 2015. Shakespeare on Bank Street was 2016. And
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was recorded, but it may have been. Uh, you know, Edith may have recorded that for the archives. Uh, and after that, the I was asked to give a lecture for the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Research about HB and Uta and Herbert. They were coming to
Okay.
HB. And so the way I planned that program was that I would talk for about 45 minutes, show a lot of slides, uh, and uh, and then I asked Fritz and Rochelle to talk about working with HB, Uta, and Herbert, and then do a reading. So
Okay.
Rochelle did uh, a reading of a monologue from a Horton Foote play.
Hmm.
And I had asked Fritz to do something from Prometheus. It was Robert Lowell's adaptation of Aeschylus' Prometheus Bound.
Okay.
And Fritz talked to Uta was the female, the actress lead in that
Hmm.
production. And there are lots of photos from it. And so Fritz talked about working with Uta on that. And then he read a monologue from it. And we had the slides from HB's production of it behind Fritz as he was doing that.
Okay.
And the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Research uh, videotaped that, and that's on their website. So I have a link to that.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
it's not the greatest quality video, but you can
Right.
hear and see what's going on.
Okay.
Uh, and that was 2015. And it was fascinating because Fritz was not only a good friend of Uta's, a member of the board, but he actually acted with her in that
Yeah.
play. Uh,
I remember she always spoke very highly of him.
yeah, I miss both of them
Yeah.
very much. Um, the next thing, which was really a big thing, was Uta's Centennial, which came up in 2019.
Right.
And in many ways, I helped coordinate that at HB. I curated the opening program
which was called The Young Uta Hagen, An Actress's Beginnings, and which featured, Arthur French, Barbara Barry, Katie Finneran, Lila Robbins, and several students as well. But again, it was a nice way to give students, more established students, an opportunity to work with working actors.
Mm-hmm.
And that featured, again, there were scenes from Hay Fever, and Jonathan Lynn, a great British writer and director who actually created the TV series Yes, Minister.
Okay.
But he had worked a lot with Noel Coward, so he came and coached Katie Finneran and the students in the Hay Fever scene. And I have some photos of that. And then there was Lila Robbins and Monica Bell did a scene from Hamlet, because Uta's professional debut was really in Hamlet. She played Ophelia to Eva Le Gallienne's Hamlet in Massachusetts.
Okay.
That was her, and she wrote a lot about that in her diaries, and that is fascinating material in the library's archives.
Yeah.
That
I remember when she died, we were going through things and separating to make sure that everything that was her professional work went to the library.
yeah,
And seeing, I mean, that's what people did then. They just wrote. And
yeah,
seeing that, it was very personal.
yeah, and even of course, those diaries, which I didn't know about at first. I knew about the ones which I'll talk about later from the 60s, but these were from the 30s. It was like a young actress's thoughts about life and in all of its aspects. And so she wrote quite a lot about her time with Hamlet, how her parents came to see it, her father and I guess stepmother at that point.
Beatrice.
Yeah. And interesting thing, side note about the letters from her father are often in German, not all of them.
Well, growing up, they only spoke German in the home.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we couldn't, at one point I thought I studied German in college a little bit, but not enough to do justice to his letters.
Yeah.
So at some point that's something that that would be really interesting. But there were letters in English as well.
Yeah.
And of course the inaugural program also included a scene from The Seagull, which was her professional. And we had Snezana Chernova coach students in that. And in that, it was two students, as Konstantin and Nina.
Okay.
And that was really wonderful. And I also arranged during the centennial, for instance, I also have a connection with the Al Hirschfeld Foundation. And for this, and because I knew them, and I do work for them occasionally. I just finished a job. I got them to give permission to HB to use Al Hirschfeld's drawings of Uta without charge in a lot of the publicity for the centennial. And then I also wrote a piece about Uta, which is on the Al Hirschfeld website still.
Okay.
And which features, I guess it would be the first Hirschfeld of many, but the first one in which Uta is featured. And I don't think you can see this that well, but this is
yes, I see it.
And you see my piece follows, and that remains on the website.
Okay.
And in addition to that, I went back to the library and said, "Do you know this is we're celebrating Uta's centennial, and her archives are here." And there were new administration there at the time, partly.
Right.
But could we do some programs here as part of the library's series? And what about an exhibition? And they said, of course. And so the programs consisted of, that may have been when I gave the talk about Uta and featured you and your mother.
Right. Yeah, because
We
there was the exhibition and we gave them on loan her National Endowment of the Arts.
right, but so that program, that talk that I gave about Uta, in which you and Letty wonderfully read those letters. Um, Other programs in that Centennial series, which we did at the library, was uh, we did a master class with Austin Pendleton with professional actors
Oh,
talking about Uta and her method, but largely just a master class for Austin in honor of Uta's centennial. And then we did a Chekhov's a Chekhov class. HB actually did a class as part of that series on Chekhov, which of course is connected to Uta's uh, debut in The Seagull.
right.
And so Lila Robinson, Frank Wood were the teachers for that, and they brought the cast up to the library
Okay.
and presented that. And then, of course, we did. Oh, there were some other things connected with that as well, program-wise. But the other big thing was the exhibition, which I curated up on the third floor of the library, mostly incorporating materials from the archives, but also the materials, as you said, that you loaned,
Right.
the metal. And that was real. I still have the captions for those, which are largely quotes about Uta or from Uta's writings, to go with all of the materials that we put on display, because there were, we tried to cover not only her professional life, but her activism and her teaching and even her cooking. So for, several exhibition cases, we really covered a lot. And
I think she had three. There were three cases of her.
no, I think there were more than that, because I think there were at least three to do
There was three
with,
on one wall.
yeah. But then across from that, there was the activism and cooking case. And then in
Right.
another case, which is right at the entrance to where the Theater on Film and Tape archive was, or is,
Hmm.
where all the actors and people go and look at the productions of shows that they might be working on. So right outside that, we had Uda's teaching. The case was
Okay.
devoted to Uda's teaching.
Okay. I remember there
And
was one case, it had a set. There was a set of one of the shows that she did. And then there was another one that had a drawing of her, I think, in costume for Othello.
yeah, that's right.
And it
I
was
think,
beautiful. I mean, it was just like the colors were just, they were pure and rich.
yeah, and that was not from her archives, because we drew from materials about her in the
Right.
other archives at the library. So I think that was in the designers
Hmm.
collection. And she had a long career, so we had to sort of cover from hay fever to six dance lessons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were some letters. There was one in the activism case. There were her letters about her political activities during streetcar, particularly.
Okay.
And and there was also her FBI file,
Yeah.
which she was able to request years later, for having been blacklisted. Lots of redactions in it, but there you see, I selected a page or two where you could see something about what she said, but then there were a lot of things that had magic marker through them,
Yeah.
that even though she was allowed to request them at some point, they still felt obliged to redact them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The government did. And but I want to say something about Streetcar, because when she was, I think that a lot of people just don't know that she was in Streetcar, that she played Blanche. And I did a program in around the time that I had spoken to Uta. I did a program on the 50th anniversary of Streetcar, and the program consisted of a talk by Kim Hunter, the original Stella, and then Kim read some letters, and then we showed the full film, Streetcar, in 35
Okay.
millimeter. But I remember when we were rehearsing for that, a day or so before, I took Kim across the street to the Juilliard cafeteria for a cup of tea. And I said to her, you know, you're on Broadway in Streetcar. You created the role of Stella. You were in the movie for which you won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Who was, in your opinion, was the best Blanche? And at that point, I knew about Vivian Leigh and Jessica Tandy.
Mm-hmm.
And Uta looked at me and she said, Uta Hagen. And I did not know then that Uta had played Blanche. This is before the archives came, before I really studied a lot about her. I knew the basics.
Right.
And so in work, you know, as I worked on some of those programs about Uta, I did some research on all the reviews related to Streetcar, both on Broadway and on tour, because Uta toured with Anthony Quinn,
Mm-hmm.
which was mostly directed by Harold Clurman, who was a great friend of Uta's, and
Okay.
who in fact was, as you know, in love with her, which does come across.
That I did not know, but
well, I'm talking to give family.
I'm continuously learning new things about my
Yeah,
grandmother.
I mean that's clear in the letters from
Okay.
from him to her. Uta's involvement with Streetcar was that she was hired by Kazan to do to play Blanche on Broadway when the actors went on vacation. Now, the supporting actors, including Jessica Tandy, had a 6-week vacation that summer, but the other actors only had 2-week vacations, including Marlon Brando, Kim Hunter, Carl Malden. So Uta played, although she later toured the big tour with Anthony Quinn, whom they adored each other. And there was a wonderful letter from Anthony Quinn, I digress, that we used in the exhibition, which he calls her Teach. And because they not only played together, but she gave him good advice, teaching and acting advice. But so she got to play on Broadway with the other leads in Streetcar for 4 weeks because Tandy had the longer vacation.
So she played with Brando for 4 weeks?
I think that was the impression I had, yes.
Okay, because I've heard her talk about, she talked about it when she was alive, and there's footage, how she didn't get along with him because he wouldn't rehearse.
Right. But then she also talks about how he arrived at the last minute, yet they did a great job because they knew where everything was. They knew all their cues.
Okay.
So I think she worked with him for more than just the occasional performance.
Okay. I thought it was shorter for some reason. But...
Yeah, I have to look that up. But if you look up the reviews of her and on tour, a lot of them say, you know, Jessica Tandy was brilliant, but you know, I think Uta Hagen was better. Or they might not have used those words, but some of the reviews from critics who saw both Tandy and Hagen actually thought she was a brilliant Blanche.
She had more diversity in the character?
Yeah, it was just different. You know, somewhere I read that, I don't remember who said this. Maybe it was something Uta wrote or something Clurman said, but she did not like working with Kazan that much.
Okay.
But she loved working with Clurman, so she was delighted when he was picked to direct the tour, although Kazan demanded a lot of the credit for the tour. But I think what she or someone said was that in Kazan's Streetcar, it was about the triumph of Stanley, whereas in Clerman's, it was about the tragedy of Blanche. I don't remember.
Interesting.
It was like a different approach, but I don't remember where I read that. But I probably used that in one of the captions. So I could
Okay.
find it. So yes, the streetcar was a major part of her career at that point. And I remember Edward Albee talking about it, and Al Prince, who had seen her do it.
Hmm.
And so that was focusing on some of that in that exhibition, and focusing on her whole career, just about even the cookbook, was just showed the diversity of this incredible woman.
Yeah.
There are these great photos, which I'm sure you know about, of her in Montauk and the gardening. And another aspect which struck me, as I said, I read Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf when I was very young. And there is in Uda's later diaries in the 60s, she has an entry which says something like, oh, I was sent this script this morning. It's called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And it looks really interesting, and I'm going to go home and read it. And she talks about it like just another script.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course she was blown away by it, and she agreed to do it. And there's a lot of discussion about that in her diary.
Hmm.
And then she talks about finally meeting Edward Albee and saying he looks like a 12-year-old boy. And so that was, it's amazing how you can look at the evolution of an idea into what an actor thinks about getting the script, into, of course, the fruition with this incredible production. Also, she went to London with it, and her diaries talk a lot about her work in London at the time and meeting people. There's really the most wonderful piece by the actress Prunella Scales about Uta.
Okay.
Prunella, you know Prunella Scales. She was best known because she was a great stage actress, but she'd done a lot of television, and she was the female lead in Fawlty Towers, the television series, the
Okay.
wife of John Cleese.
Okay.
But it's quite a beautiful piece she wrote about Uta, and we've used that in some of the programs as well. So after the centennial, I don't know how much about of Herbert you get into in these because what we in the archive, which we use this is in the exhibition. She talks about meeting him and how they stayed up all night sitting on the shore looking at the river, and he would talk about they would talk about theater and life, and it is quite amazing. And I used to use this at HB board meetings. I would say to encourage them to get new actors to teach.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good response if an actor says, well, I'm not a teacher. When Herbert asked Uta to teach way back, he said, I'm not a teacher, and he said, you're an actor. Share what you've learned.
Yeah.
And that's a great approach that he took.
It's so simple.
Yeah. So the first program I did about Herbert was called A Birthday Celebration, and that was in 2017.
Oh, look at that.
And of course, that actually, I was part of that. I curated part of that program with Richard Maw and Kelly Wolfe, whom you may know.
Okay. Yep. She was on the podcast.
Right. There was a program of readings. Go on. Sorry.
I was going to sixth dance lesson. No, the Silver Fox.
Right.
And she teaches the master class of my grandmother.
Yeah.
She did the program and she can teach it now.
Well, she was wonderful to work with. I I put together readings after they talked about Uta and Herbert, mostly Herbert because it was his birthday celebration. But I put together some readings for them,
Hmm.
which they did, and it was just wonderful working with them. And the second part of that program was a short play by Lanford Wilson called The Betrothal. That was mostly to do with Herbert, and that was read by Rachelle Oliver and George Morfogen and directed by Austin. So that was
Okay.
quite a interesting, diverse program. And then in 2020, and this is like a month before COVID really hit,
Hmm.
um, we did a program because it was the 75th anniversary of HB.
Hmm.
And so I was asked to put together a program. And so it was called Herbert Berghoff, The Yearning Gaze of a Poet, a
Okay.
staged reading of performance. And pull this up again. But, and it was also, of course, about Uta as well. The Yearning Gaze of a Poet, I think, comes from an obituary that someone wrote about Herbert. But we featured students and actors on that. The established actors were Mark Blum, Clark Jackson, Mark Nelson. Mark Blum sadly died of COVID, I believe, the next month,
Okay.
and that was really sad. And um, so that was 2020, and then everything shut down because of COVID.
And then how did it change for you? I mean, it's kind of, we all have our own stories with COVID, but how did it change everything for you with the studio, being on the board, and the dynamics of the studio and the challenges that were presented?
Well, we continued to meet uh, on Zoom,
Okay.
and HB pivoted to doing classes on Zoom. I remember Rachelle Oliver saying, "Well, you can't do classes on Zoom because you need your scene partner in the same room with you, the same space." But then she started doing it, and she was so flexible and started to really enjoy it. And that was, she was really adapted
Yeah.
well to it. And later on, much later, when she wasn't well, that was a lifesaver for her
Yeah.
because she was able to continue to teach that way.
Yeah.
Uh,
That was the gift of COVID.
yeah, the gift of such as it is. So yes, there were a lot of we had to cancel we were going to do a gala, I think, and then because the Uta Centennial also included an incredible gala it was a rooftop
In
somewhere
Tribeca.
in Tribeca.
It was in Tribeca. It was huge.
Yeah, it was great. And I think it was, and we continued to give the Uda and Herbert awards. And I believe Elaine May received it that year and was presented by and Elaine May, like nights before, had won the Tony Award.
Okay.
But that was presented by Marlo Thomas. And
And Denzel Washington's son got one.
yes, he got one. He was a student of
And
Rochelle's.
yeah, and Alexander Bernstein.
And Alexander,
Yeah.
yes, his was given by a friend of his who's also the director whom I worked with, but his name escapes me at the moment. But the very, very funny bit at that wonderful dinner, it really was a great
It
evening.
was.
And I guess it was our last gala.
Yeah, I was going to
Um,
say it was kind of the perfect send-off.
it would have been probably June 2019, which was Uda's
Yeah.
centennial month. But David Hyde Pierce and Marlo Thomas put together a song about Uta
Hmm.
to tune of a famous song. I forgot what it was.
Hmm.
I, I actually, as many people uh, did a little video of that. I don't know if you've seen it or if you have it, but I
I
must
might
have
have
it
it somewhere.
somewhere. So that
And
was really wonderful.
Scott Ellis, is it Scott Ellis or Scott Davis?
Scott
the
Ellis.
director.
He was on a previous gala.
But he was at the one in Tribeca.
Yeah, I
He
don't think
was
he was.
there.
Was he part of the program? Because he
No, he was a
was.
guest. He was a
Because he was
guest.
part of. I think the previous year we did it at the wine. No, well now
There
the
was one at the City Winery,
yes, and then there was one in 14, that place on 14th Street.
that wonderful 14th and 5th
Yeah.
upstairs.
So I forgot which came first, but all I remember
Right,
is that the one in honor of Uta Centennial was the last one in
right.
June 2019. We were planning one. I think we even put down a deposit for one down there for 2020, but then that was the height of COVID,
Okay,
so we had to
okay.
cancel. And hopefully they'll get back to that someday because they're not only, galas are never just money makers. They're great events for profile.
Yeah.
And
To bring the livelihood of the school back
yeah,
and
so
show what it is and what it has been for students for so many years.
but then we did get back, then we lost Richard Maw at some point remained on the board, but he he thought the time had come for him to resign as chair. This is several
Okay,
years before COVID.
right.
So Marie-Louise Stegall became the
Stepped in.
chair.
Hmm.
Richard remained on the board, but then he died, and he was one of the great losses we had. And we had a wonderful memorial for him at Hunter College because he had been a dean there and a teacher
I
there.
remember.
So, yes, then we got back to meeting in person and rebuilding and doing what we could to bring back the vitality of the school.
Hmm.
And continued to do what we could. It is very good, dedicated board. And I don't think I did any programs after that because everything was concentrated on, you know, leading up to the retirement of the executive and artistic director. I
Hmm.
was on the search committee for the successor, and I was really happy with the way it turned out.
And
We
Francesca
finally,
Ferrara.
well, finally, we did a search for many, many months, and we had a search firm. We interviewed applicants. We narrowed it down. First, the search firm narrowed it down. Then they referred several to us. We interviewed a few of them on Zoom. We narrowed it down, interviewed them again. Then we decided to meet a few in person and we talked about them. Then a couple of them came in to talk to the board, the full board, the two finalists, I mean. And then we
Hmm.
talked about that for a while. And then we just decided that the best thing for HB would be for the structure that we now have in place, you now have in
Hmm.
place at HB, which features Francesca Ferrara and Christopher Hibma as a more
Yeah,
organizational
they're a great team. They're
director.
such a great team.
And I'm so pleased with the way that has turned out.
Yeah,
But it was important for us to go through all those due diligence steps of
yeah.
having it advertised, seeing who's out there, and then interviewing very diverse group of people,
Hmm.
and then realizing that we did what we wanted, what we thought was best.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really,
You
I
had
think
one of the
that's working
candidates at the
well.
school. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you had one of the candidates at the school. I mean, Francesca studied with Herbert and my grandmother and teaches there. And I will say, I have met Chris a couple of times and I have spoken with both of them in person. And what they generate and what they bring and what their passion is and what the reality is, it's a really good team.
yes,
It's a really nice new energy that is brought to the school with still the integrity of the school.
yeah, I agree.
And it's refreshing.
Yeah. And one of my dearest colleagues on the board, who was on the search committee as well, uh, who was also instrumental in supporting this new structure, was Ted Berger, who died just a
Yeah.
month or so ago, and it was a
Yeah.
wonderful memorial to him at the synagogue up on the west side.
Hmm.
Um, so the legacy lives on, Uta's legacy, Herbert's legacy, um, and I just hope it flourishes and that they can stay on Bank Street.
From your mouth to our ears.
Yeah, but I
I
know when you see that video of her coming out of the door,
with GB
yeah,
with
at
the little, yeah.
in that I think that's part of the opening of Uta Hagen's master acting class
Hmm.
video.
I my mom and I were in a documentary recently, and
I read about that.
we were sitting in the theater, and they always said this, these buildings are yours,
Yeah,
to the students. And I've brought people into the school and the buildings over the years, and you can feel it in the bones.
yeah.
In the bones of the building, you feel the history. And yeah, I mean, as you said, I just hope.
And I just have to say, it is a really wonderful board, a wonderful group of dedicated people who care and who are doing what they think is right. I think my feeling about the buildings as of is a little different because I have theater history in my bones. It comes from working at the library and producing all those programs in music, dance, theater, film.
Mhm.
And so I know to leave those buildings, you can, to a certain extent, take the spirit of Uta and Herbert with you. But the difference now, and this is only my opinion, and it could be
Mhm.
the wrong opinion, is that first of all, those buildings are special. As you say, it's in the bones of those buildings are part of what makes HB. Of course, Herbert started the school somewhere else more uptown.
On Sixth Avenue between 23rd and 24th.
Right, but
And
with leaky pipes and
yeah, and
everything.
Paul Roebling, who was a student of his at the time, helped them find 120. I interviewed
Right.
his son, Chris, and he told me the whole story.
Is he part of the Brooklyn Bridge family?
Yeah, that's Paul Roebling.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So Paul and Olga studied with my grandmother, and they became very good friends with Jerry, Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira.
Right.
And then Jerry and Ann had Ben and his sister Amy, and Chris and Olga had, Paul and Olga had Chris. And I've known Chris since the 80s, and he was on the podcast. And
Wow.
he told me the whole story. And Herbert and Robert Duvall and Olga did the show, directed, I think, by Herbert, tomorrow. And then it went into film, and Herbert didn't go with them, and told me the story of that. And Olga and Robert Duvall were in the film together. So,
Wow.
yep.
That's interesting because, I mean, to digress for a moment, I've just curated for the Al Hirschfeld Foundation uh, an online exhibition on Julie Harris, whom I've worked with.
Hmm.
But I
Very nice
had,
lady.
oh, she was wonderful
Yeah.
and so important in the theater. And I had a Zoom meeting with a very generous and kind Ken Burns, because Julie read on about uh, many of his documentaries, most famously in the
Oh,
Civil War. But
okay.
she later won a spoken word Tony or Oscar. Which one was it? Or Emmy. It was an Emmy, spoken word
Okay.
Emmy for reading Susan B. Anthony when
Okay.
he did his, and that was the last thing she did for Ken Burns when he did the documentary about Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B.
This,
Anthony. But the first, when I interviewed him, he said the first, and this leads to what you just said. The first time he met her, he was like a kid working as a production on a, a documentary that somebody else was doing,
mhm,
producing, and Julie Harris was involved in that, and he told her what he wanted to do, and he wanted to continue in that, and he said his first film of his own company was going to be Brooklyn Bridge. And she said, "Oh, let me know if I could help." And these were just kids. He's out of college.
that's
And
funny.
as she left the reading of that production, which actually had to do with Emily Dickinson, but it was way before the Belle of Amherst. Um,
Hmm.
she said, "Don't forget about the Brooklyn Bridge." So when he was ready to do that, he said, "Would you read the part of Mrs. Roebling, the wife of the man who built the Brooklyn Bridge,
Hmm.
basically, who later became involved in making it happen because her husband was sick." So she
That's
did that.
funny.
So that was the first gig she had with a Ken Burns documentary, and she was in many of them as a
Yeah.
reader actress. She was the Roebling one. So that's connected to what you just said
The
about,
world gets smaller and smaller.
yeah, 6 degrees of,
Yeah. I met her. She was doing a show at the Lucille Lortel, and I worked at an ice cream parlor down the block. And she would come in every day and get a juice, and everybody was like, "That's Julie Harris," and I was like, and
right.
then I somehow we were talking, and then I said to her, "Oh, my grandmother is Uta Hagen." She's like, "Oh, then you know Mitch," and I was like, "Wait a minute, you know Mitch Erickson?"
Yeah.
And Mitch and her were like really tight as he was with my grandmother. It's just so funny.
Another connection between them, I don't want to get too much into that, um, was they were both close to Charles Nelson Riley,
Mm.
which,
But my grandmother wasn't after a while.
well, after a while, but initially.
Yes. Yes, he would give her very lavish gifts.
Right.
And he actually gave her a bracelet that I now have. That's just
Oh, wow.
beautiful gold with these little pearls. And she was like, "You're spending too much money." And he was like, "Uta, just take it." So,
Right.
but I would like to ask you one last question. And you've kind of already answered it, but what is your wish for the studio? You've left the board, and as an outsider now, a partial outsider, what is your wish for the school?
In any milieu or any time, they're important. As you say, the Uda and Herbert are in the bones of those buildings, the
Hmm.
spirit. You can take that away to some extent to another place. But the difference for me now, as I said, because theater history is so important to me, is in this current climate, uh, it's not only that they're in the bones of those buildings, it's that other, there are more acting schools now. Every small theater companies, moderate sized nonprofit
Yeah.
theater companies are beginning to start classes and schools. I'm meeting with one next week about an entirely different issue. Um,
Hmm.
the great British companies are having outposts in New York, RADA and Lambda, the Royal Academy, the London Academy of Dramatic
Hmm.
Arts. And so the online is another issue of the internationally, there are schools teaching online. So I think in this climate, and I see a lot of grant applications because of the Noel Coward Foundation. I've reviewed grants for NISCA this past year, and I know how hard it is, and I know how things are changing. And so I think there's more competition. There's the traditional competitors, the Actors Studio, the Neighborhood Playhouse,
Hmm.
the Barrow Group. But then there's more than that. So I think in this climate, I think the buildings are even more important. So, I mean, my wish, of course, is to for HB and the other thing is that not all the classes could be said to be Uda's method or whatever. So
Right.
it's not like wherever HB goes, everything is going to be related to that, because it isn't
Yeah.
the case even now, although they do try. And Herbert. So, and first of all, I love that little theater. I know how the irony of how they got it, which I discovered and put in several programs. The fact that the very left-wing Herbert Berghoff used money from the most commercial, outrageous movie of all time, to Cleopatra with Liz and Dick, to
Yeah.
pay for his earnings for that, to pay for that little theater building
Yeah.
is amazing. And to digress once more, when he was paid to continue being on staff of Cleopatra while they were working out some things, Uta and Herbert toured around Italy, and her writings about Rome are just the most beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful things. I remember she ends one day's diary saying, "La dolce, dolce vita," this sweet, sweet life. Yeah, she's describing the scenery she sees, the flowers, the
Yeah.
buildings, and then enjoying her relationship with Herbert, the food. So, my hope is that they remember their roots of Uta and Herbert, continue to celebrate them, which I know they will do,
Yeah.
and then to recruit, and I think they're doing this too, some high profile teachers, because I think that's important and that is doable, just as Herbert recruited Uta,
Yeah.
and to try to stay on Bank Street. And hopefully, I've continued to care deeply about HB, and I want it to thrive. I look forward to. I've been spoken at two memorials there recently. One for Rachelle Oliver, the other for Jesse Filer, and I want it to thrive, and I know the board and staff are trying to make that happen.
Yeah. Alan, thank you for giving us this wonderful plethora of information, from being at the library to creating the events and being a board member. And if anybody wants more information on my grandmother or Herbert, they can go to the Lincoln Center Library, where we have given, well, for my grandmother, we gave all of her professional work there, and you can see it there. So thank you, Alan, for giving us so much of your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to do this, and I hope to see you soon.
If you like this podcast, please feel free to share this with your friends.
Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more stories on the professional and personal life of Uta Hagen and Herbert.